Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to our first session in this room. My name is Laura Thorson. I'm a program manager on the DevRel team at GitHub, and I'm excited to welcome Caitlin Vignali, who is on the education team. She's going to be leading an awesome panel for y'all today. So please give it up for her. Give her a big round of applause.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we're chatting about AI in education. As she mentioned, I'm the product lead for GitHub Education. I have a question for the audience first. Are there any students or teachers here? Raise a hand. All right, we got a good mix. Yeah, I see the GitHub experts in the back. Campus experts. So the GitHub Education mission is to enable all future developers. To date, we've served around 5.4 million students and 130,000 teachers. And at any given time, we have around 2 million active students. I'm pretty proud of those numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, give it up. Our goal is to have reached 10 million students by the end of 2025, and we're on track to do that. So one way that we're doing that is by giving access to developer tools to verified students and teachers for free. And that includes GitHub's AI pair programmer, Copilot. What Stormy was saying earlier today is true. We're giving that away for free. So today, we've got some students and teachers here to talk with us about AI in education. First, we have Samyukta Gopalsame. She recently obtained her master's in computer science from Rutgers, and she's now a software engineer at Moody's Analytics in New York. Sam, how are you enjoying Universe thus far?
I've been loving it. Yesterday, there was a lot of conversation around AI and education and security. So it's really an exciting time, and I'm really looking forward to getting this conversation going.
I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ignacio Palma. He's a student at the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, where he's pursuing his bachelor's degree in data science, and he's heading up the Artificial Intelligence Club. He's also a GitHub Campus expert, which is one of our GitHub education programs for student community leaders. Thank you for being here, Ignacio. I have to say, he flew 20 hours to be here, so I'm really happy he's here.
Wow.
Next up, we have Brooke Riggio. He's the VP of Education and co-founder at Code Fellows, a Seattle-based intensive tech academy. And he's actually giving another talk on AI later today. Is that the Discussions Lounge? What time is it at?
Yeah, new format with the discussions. That'll be at, 2:30, I think.
Okay,
And
all right.
join me over there for talking about what AI can't do that you can.
Yeah, so check the agenda. I'll be there. So also, if you want to corner me and ask me questions, you can do so there. And last but certainly not least, we've got Joel Hammer. He's the chair of computer science at the Friends School of Baltimore. Thank you for joining us today. I have to ask, I actually currently live in Baltimore. Are you a Ravens fan?
Until about 3:30 every day, and then I bleed black and gold. I'm from Pittsburgh, so.
Okay. I come from a long line of Buffalo Bills fans because we like to be tortured. So welcome all of you, and thank you for joining us here at Universe. So we've gathered this specific group together today to further the conversation around AI and education. And we want to hear from them because they have firsthand experience in a new age of learning enhanced by artificial intelligence. We're going to learn more about how AI is being used to improve student outcomes and create more equitable learning environments. So I'm going to clarify some of the boundaries of this conversation. We're not going to be debating whether or not AI should be used in the classroom, but the best ways to leverage AI, as well as any cautions or guardrails to implement. And also, we're not going to be taking questions, but we do have a discussion post for this panel, so you can engage with us asynchronously, or we're going to be available after the panel out in where that couch area is. I know that there's another talk right after this, so we're not going to be in this space, but you can grab us there. So first, I'd like to go down the line here and hear from each of you a story about how you have used or seen AI used in the classroom. Sam, let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Caitlin. So I recently graduated with a master's degree in computer science. And as a student, I found that AI tools like ChatGPT transformed part of my academic experience. During my time in grad school, reading research papers were a huge part of our academic curriculum. but it was incredibly time-consuming. For instance, in my computer networks class, we were assigned 3 to 4 research papers to read each week, covering complex topics like networking protocols and system security. And this often took me around 4 to 5 hours to read these papers and prepare for each of these classes. But when ChatGPT was introduced last year, it kind of changed the game. It was not only able to summarize these papers effectively, but also make logical inferences between various papers. Although I must admit it was not easy to get perfect responses, there was a lot of prompting involved. But despite that, I kind of found that it improved my prep time and enhanced the learning experience. So I'm really excited to see the possibilities that AI tools can have for future learners.
Thanks. Ignacio?
I have a really fun story. So my mom is a teacher there in Chile, in Copiapó, a northern city in Chile. And she's a linguistic teacher there. And well, she told me one day at the start of the year, yeah, I have a homework. I say homework, students need to write a story. And she told me wow, the students are doing so great. I never seen this, something like this. And Mom, you know about ChatGPT? So, yes.
Brooke, how about you?
Oh, obviously, we're seeing the industry change in really dramatic ways, really suddenly. And so students who are going through the learning process need to be prepared for an entirely different type of job these days. So at CodeFellows, we've integrated teaching with AI, how to use AI tools into our curriculum so that students can get a handle on all the different ways that it affects the job. And we see students over and over again go through this 5-stage process of fearing the AI and then kind of dabbling with it a little bit, and then their minds are blown by it in stage 3, right? And then they try to use it for everything, and of course it doesn't work for everything. And then finally, they settle into this really solid flow where it becomes an indispensable tool.
Joel, how about you?
So I lead a department of a small team of computer science educators. The great thing is our department's about as old as Copilot is, so we don't really remember a world without it in our academic program. So I was excited that this year we got together and started our first AI mandatory course. And we start kids out with small projects all the way up until they're using AI to become more independent coders. We've had to do that in a very intentional way, and I'm excited to talk more about that, but it's a tremendous resource, and we're very grateful to GitHub for access to Copilot for one.
All right, Brooke, this next question is for you. With self-paced learning on the rise because of the pandemic and AI, do you feel the role of a teacher is changing?
Yeah, I think we just got to recognize off the bat that the educational experience for teachers and students has been very tumultuous over the last few years, right? And certainly with pandemics and lockdowns, a lot of things have shifted. And AI is in that mix with how everything is shifting, right? And ultimately, one thing that this reveals is that students themselves are ultimately responsible for their own learning. They're the ones who have to turn on the growth mindset. They have to dig in and find the grit to stay engaged with material. They have to find what material they want to be exposed to and put themselves into those situations, right? So students have this very significant responsibility for their own absorption of information and their own learning, right? And then at the same time, we also can see really clearly that teachers are at their best not when they're just dumping information out into the classroom, but instead igniting a fire for a desire to learn. And that's something, that ChatGPT is not going to just do off the bat, right? And so we still see the best teachers doing great things with this kind of level of reaching inspiration. And this together combines to giving students a new level of independence where they get that seed of desire, and then they can go out and pursue that, follow their curiosity, and find what they want to learn with an amazing new set of resources right at their fingertips.
Sam, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Of course. I mean, you make a really valid point, Brooke, that the students have always been responsible for their learning, and the best teachers have actually inspired that desire in them. And with the advent of AI in classroom, I feel that this dynamic is only evolving, in a remarkable way. You see, like AI has this potential to act as like a personalized teaching assistant, which is available for each student and accessible 24/7. So now students have like this access, and like teachers can focus on the interactive and creative aspects of learning, like more towards like bringing curiosity towards the students. So I feel like this is a win-win situation, harnessing like the best of both worlds, both for educators as well as like students.
Yeah, I think it's true because like that level of personalization for what students do really becomes key to redefining what their whole learning journey could look like. It almost becomes a choose your own adventure of learning where students can pick an outcome that they want to achieve, and then AI tools could feasibly just build out a pathway to that and give them step by step what they need to achieve to get there, and even AI-generated content to guide them through that process. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how this all gets built. And talk to me if you're building this kind of thing. I want to know more about this.
Of course, that's definitely an idea worth exploring. So one point that I wanted to add, the way like teachers can make education more interactive is by actually embracing an existing concept known as flipped classroom model. If you've heard of flipped classroom, it's more like students have more independence over their learning, where they're learning at their own pace, either at home or at school, with AI kind of like helping them along the way. So now teachers can focus on what they do the best, right? Like leading interactive group discussions or group activities that reinforce the concepts that the students have actually learned individually. So this actually combines like the best of both worlds with AI and human educators. It's not about replacing the roles of teachers, but actually making their roles even better and transforming the face of education. So in an essence, I feel like the changing role of teachers in the context of AI in classroom is actually a promising transformation, which is going to benefit both educators and students. Thanks.
Ignacio, how does the shifting role of a teacher affect how students learn?
Well, it's a very good question. Just like Sam said, the shifting role of the teacher is changing in a way that is making the student, like the experience of learning, more inclusive and engaging. For example, myself, like a student from Chile, my second language is English. So these AI tools enable us to learn in a way that we have never seen before. Like before, we had YouTube, but other resources were in English. So now with these AI tools, we're able to interact with like a tutor that is able to speak our language. And well, it's making the whole experience of learning more engaging. Like it's like Sam said,
Yeah.
the flipped classroom,
Yeah.
the change of the methodology that the teacher use is amazing, I think.
So it sounds like you're saying that AI is making things more accessible to students.
Yeah.
Great.
And engaging.
Sam, do you feel that suggestions from AI like Copilot are changing the way you express yourself in code?
For me, like using AI tools like Copilot and ChatGPT has actually made me realize how it actually makes the coding process significantly faster. Like for someone like me who has experience in coding but is still learning, I feel like these suggestions only push the coding standards for better. Like kind of like encourage proper code formatting, naming conventions, and best practices. It's almost like having this code reviewer right there with you, who's like pushing you towards those best practices. And I definitely feel that it enhances my code quality and code productivity. But I also feel that it doesn't necessarily change my coding style. I mean, I still want my code to reflect my own, unique preferences and style. So I do find myself asking AI to regenerate responses until I kind of get something that aligns with what I'm looking for. So yeah, but in terms of like a new learner who's like very new to like coding, I feel like these suggestions can be a game changer, right? So they can introduce us to skills that we are not even aware of, like probably writing comprehensive test cases or adopting modular approach to coding, or like new libraries or tools. So with all those new skills and like practices, I think it'll have an impact in the way a new learner would express themselves in code, especially from like a learner's perspective.
Joel, what are you seeing on the educator side?
Sure. Maybe I'm going to say something a bit controversial, but I think it's important, so I'm just going to say it. I don't know if code per se is expressive. Like, it's not a Jackson Pollock painting, except for JavaScript. Like, but what I mean is we have syntax and structure and best practices and ways to work together as a team. And if you don't do it just so, like, it doesn't work. And that's the whole point. But, and I think I'm going to talk at length about this in a moment, if we can kind of broaden our horizons about what coding as an activity means, and we can use AI in a targeted sort of way, then yeah, I think coding can be expressive. But we have to think through it in, as I say, a broad way and with a level of intentionality.
So from the educator as a guide point of view, does cutting out repetitive tasks and prototyping reveal more impactful learnings for students, or should that friction exist?
So this question about the educator's role and guiding students through that process, I mean, this has been around forever in education, right? But I think there's a little more to that question than meets the eye. So, like, I mean, who here has never in their life found themselves awake at, say, 3 in the morning, right? Like, beating your head into the computer screen because, like, you can't figure out that one thing, and it's always the same, right? The forgotten semicolon or the curly brace, or you spelled something wrong. And my coding folder in high school was called programs because I had spelled it wrong, but I already wrote it into a script somewhere, and it was like, it's too late, so I just had to wait until I threw the hard drive away. I don't have to explain that story to a room like this. I do have to explain it to my English colleagues because they think it's nuts. But it's part of our culture. It's like what we do as programmers. Our intro kids aren't ready for that yet. We don't ask them to write 30 versions of FizzBuzz or the number guesser thing because we hate them or we want to haze them. We do it because there's a real discipline and a way of thinking that we want to build. So we've tried to lean into that at Friends. We have our intro classes are more structured, but with a focus to asking questions. And as they progress, they're able to direct those questions with the help of AI to actually improve their learning, to become more independent until at the highest levels, I'm sort of not even teaching. I help them set goals, and they think through the design process themselves. So I think there is a tension and a friction, but I think it exists to help us as a community, educators, students, product designers, developers, whatever it is. If we can think together and in a dedicated way about what our values are, even on a cultural level, and we can use AI to target those things, we can build the next generation of coders to be better and not worse.
Ignacio, does the reduction of friction enable students to just become AI prompt experts?
I don't think so. I think that first students need to understand AI, then become prompt experts. So, otherwise, like the students in a high school that I went told me, ChatGPT and Copilot, my best friend. No. The students need to understand AI at least on a high level. So otherwise, the students will think that they are talking like to a genie sort of thing. It's not a genie. It's a large language model. You need to understand what is happening, at least at a high level. Then you can like debug the prompt and think about what is going on, why maybe the answer that this large language model is wrong. So I think that it's not prompt experts, but it's understand AI first, then prompt experts.
Do we have time to add in something here?
Yeah, definitely.
What I'm hearing here is that, and as an educator, I hear what you're saying about the questions students ask. Like, I feel like I can tell how well I'm doing as a teacher by what kind of questions my students are asking, right? And in a way, what I really want to train them on is how to ask the right questions. And AI might have all the answers for whatever question they're going to ask, but if they don't even know what to ask, what to be prompting for, then it's not going to matter. So maybe if we thought of all teaching experiences as helping students write better prompts, then they would do better off in any context, whether or not they're using AI tools.
Joel, I feel like you have something you want to add.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with what my colleagues up here have said. But so for some reason, I teach computer science at Friends School, and I also teach philosophy. Don't ask me why. But as a computer scientist, I'm really interested in the things that our kids can make and do. But at the same time, as a philosopher, I'm interested in what makes them human. It's an oddly timely thing to have been studying because AI exists on the nexus of those two things. And as an educator, it's my job to go into that point and help students to want the right things. And what does that have to do with prompting? Well, prompting at its core is about getting the computer to do what we want. So what do we want? Well, look, if we just want to get something done and just slap it together, and I can't tell you how many projects I've gotten since the beginning of all of this that is like, you know, here's what I made, does it work? I don't know, but it's Copilot's problem now. And it's like, what makes that so upsetting is it has this narrow focus. It's not particularly human on just putting the symbols onto an editor. But of course, we all know that coding is a big process that starts with thinking about the world and about problems that we can solve and about prototyping, and sometimes those things work like kind of, and then we learn from that and stitch it together until we have a working application that we refine until we have something that at times can be truly beautiful. So I think we need to consider coding as that larger process, and as educators or as AI tool developers, to focus on that middle stage of removing some of the discouragement that can prevent students from getting to those upper reaches of accomplishment, so that, and this is the important piece, we can focus on the parts that make us human. And that's across the board, but especially in education. And I said we can make coders better and not worse, but we're not just making cyborgs here, right? We can make coding more human. And in a world of revolutionary change, that is infinitely important. In a world of talks about efficiency, that's infinitely important, and 100% within our reach.
Yeah.
So Brooke, with this in mind, how can educators utilize AI to foster learnings both inside and outside the classroom?
Yeah, I can. Thinking inside the classroom, it's really amazing how, especially in the world of computer science education, there have traditionally been cultural barriers that people run up against, where it ends up being mostly people who look like me, who are interested in these programs, who've had exposure, had previous experiences with computers and things. And what we get now all of a sudden is an expert source of information that doesn't care about your background and doesn't judge you based on what you look like or who you are or what you've done with your life so far. Instead, you have just-in-time knowledge in the palm of your hand to answer expertly any questions that you may have. And I think that's really going to be a game changer for programs that are looking to help make this cultural shift happen so that computer science education is open to everyone, the beautiful breadth of humanity, as I like to say. But then at the same time, even though we can disregard people's backgrounds, we can also get way more effective when we incorporate information about people's backgrounds into using these kinds of AI tools. In fact, it's one thing we teach our students how to do is say, explain this to someone who has a background in blank, whatever they have a background in. And now all of a sudden they get very personalized answers. And you'll love what it tells you about understanding cross-site scripting attacks as explained to a baker, right? Or understanding REST APIs as you would want to teach it to someone who understands how to be a plumber, right? And the analogies are incredible, and they're fun, and what you actually get is culturally responsive teaching, which becomes able to incorporate what people already know and build on analogies that they already understand, and get to a whole nother level of comprehension about what we're trying to teach and communicate inside the classroom.
Sam, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, of course. I mean, outside classroom, I feel like AI has a lot of potential to augment the learning, because I feel traditional classrooms and university programs often leave students unprepared for the real world demands of their future careers. I see you nodding. Many students actually bridge this gap through internships and their first full-time role, where they're actually confronting these real-world challenges head-on. Right? During my own internship, I had to learn essential skills the hard way, like how do I negotiate and how do I communicate with my engineers and managers, and how do I debug large-scale systems. But imagine if we had tools to actually expose students to simulated realistic environments where they can actually gain practical experience in a low-stakes, risk-minimized setting. Right? I'm talking about environments that actually replicate real-world scenarios that we might encounter in our careers, like debugging software or troubleshooting hardware, or even handling customer support requests. And I feel like these environments can be simulated using audio, video, virtual reality, or even text. And they can better prepare us for the world of work. And there's a lot of opportunity to bridge that gap between classroom and career. And also to add to the points before, students should also be encouraged to actually explore the business and the creative ideas that they have, and use the increased productivity that they get from AI to prototype their ideas to life and bring that to perspective. So that will also be a transformational experience outside classroom. So it's really exciting, a lot of tools and transformations that are possible.
Ignacio, is AI bringing students closer together or creating more distance?
Ooh. So, in a way, I think that AI is bringing students closer together, but also creating more distance. Let me explain here.
So
Just like Joel said, if I have a problem at 3 a.m., I don't want to ask another student hey, how I can solve this. No, I have a Copilot or ChatGPT to help me. And I think that it will create more distance in a sense there. But what I have seen in Chile, in my community, is that with AI, and now that students have these amazing tools, students focus more on engaging with each other and creating amazing projects. And just like you said, building these soft skills like leadership and communications, and it's amazing. So, yeah, more distance, but I think that distance may be a good sign for something bigger.
Thanks, Ignacio. And thank you, everyone on the panel, for all of your thoughts. So my biggest takeaway from this conversation is that the role of a teacher is so much greater than just giving information to students. And then the responsibility of a student is so much more than just blindly finding answers. AI as a tool in education is incredibly powerful, but without understanding the tool or the content, learning is hindered. So maybe I'm gonna age myself here, but does anyone remember Cliff Notes? The black and yellow caution tape, right? So those were summaries of books that you were supposed to have read. Okay, didn't know it was still a thing. Good to know. But yeah, if you just read that, right, and you'd be able to answer some questions about the book, but you're not really creating that foundation for more learning to build upon. And this conversation, of course, is a little bit different. Leveraging AI in education is more complex. But it's a tool, just like Cliff Notes, just like Wikipedia. So this tension in education isn't new, but it's vastly more complicated as the tools become more complicated. And I think that that's sort of what I'm thinking about as the product lead of GitHub Education. How can we bridge that gap, and how can we bring these tools and understanding to our teachers and students? And that's my job. So my request for our audience is if you know a student or a teacher, or you are a student or a teacher, please sign up for Copilot and our other developer tools, which you can get access to for free at education.github.com. And also engage in our discussion post or meet us outside afterward and we can chat more. And of course, there's going to be a survey that you can fill out about this talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.